public in general is not aware of the money trails inside of polygamy, this is an exceedingly interesting bit of information. I am the voice behind the camera, and once again I'm honored to interview Ed Kociela. When we find a newspaper man who investigates beyond just the original report, he's a rare man indeed. Such a man is Ed Kociela. I'm very proud to have been able to do this interview with him. Please welcome a great news reporter.
Obviously, they have to remain legit, work out some system where some are employed.
They do make contracts and they work for children without funds. How do they do that?
Very well. They've taught those kids how to disappear from a work site. A building inspector comes by, OSHA comes by, and those kids are gone. They vanish. And a stranger starts rolling up on a work site, they're gone. You can't find them. They're not there.
And that's like rolling up on the streets of Short Creek when you're a stranger in town.
Oh, well, the people that are kind of out and about sort of disappear. But interestingly enough, when you drive into Short Creek, usually about a mile out of town, there's a town marshal parked along the side of the road, and if a strange vehicle comes in, because there's the road in and it leads out, you come near town, that marshal swings in behind you, runs your plates, find out who you are, what you're doing there, and will kind of follow you around. And strange vehicle shows up in town. Somewhere along the line, it's going to be picked up from one of these big new trucks of the residents out there. Is going to start following you around to see what you're doing. It happened to us. We went out there, last time we were out there, we go in, pass up the town marshal, and sure enough, he falls in behind us, and for some reason he fell in a little further than what normally happens, and it was kind of interesting because we were driving through town and looking around, and somewhere around the complex of where the Warren Jeffs complex, he got further behind. Well, it was kind of funny. We decided we were going to have a little fun, so we kind of doubled back and ended up following him just for fun. And we figured, okay, discretion's the better part of valor. Let's head back into town. But yeah, we kind of doubled back and fell in behind his vehicle and followed him for a little while, see how he liked it. And then there were a couple of trucks that came in from the side streets and started following, and we said, okay, it's time to go home. We had reporters that had gone out. There are a lot of stories of reporters who have gone out into the community to do stories or to cover meetings or to follow up on something or try to talk to somebody about something. Reporters have had their tires slashed, they've had their windshields broken, they've had mud smeared on their cars. Just sort of small intimidation factors involved in trying to do their job. When I moved here and then trips before moving here and checking it all out, with California plates, the minute you start going through town, a cop would pull in behind you and would run your plates and follow you. One time, it was funny. I was in Cedar because that's where I landed first, and I was driving around, kind of looking at places, neighborhoods, and what happened was I got lost, and there was a cop following me and had run it, and so finally I pull over to the curb, and the cop pulls up next to me and says, "Is there a problem, sir?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm lost." I said, "You ran my plates, you know I'm from California. I'm trying to find such and such." And he got all embarrassed and sheepish. And he said, "Oh, well, you go down here and you turn and you do this and you do whatever." I said, "Okay, cool. Thank you."
On the scene of the money, it's very important that the public understand that in this money game, it isn't just the little girls at the bottom and the women at the bottom that are hurt. Please go through the phases of the damage that this does on the way up to the top, because the money doesn't filter down, it filters up.
It filters up, and as we said, it's pretty much distributed among Warren and the people that are in his inner circle, which is very tight. Obviously, it has to be for him to have had any kind of security. It doesn't come out. The kids do not have nice clothes. The women make awful lot of them make their own clothes. The food is not of high quality. The other impact is that by being involved in commerce and the economy, they're actually taking food out of the mouths of other people and the other employers who the other companies that cannot put their people to work on these projects. So it takes from the open market. It drains the funds that could go into an open market where another company could bid on the job and put their people to work on it. So and when the economy was as tight as it was, and public facilities were the backbone of construction here for a number of years as the recession hit, it made a mark. There were a lot of companies that had to let people go, and a lot of people were displaced from southern Utah as a result of the weak construction economy.
Well, the other companies didn't have free labor.
They didn't have free labor, and they didn't have access to the contracts. They couldn't compete. They just couldn't compete.
They didn't know then that what was putting them out of business was actually slave labor in the
they knew.
under the cloak of religion.
They knew, and they tried to prove it. I mean, I've sat in on meetings, where they've tried to instill upon the city councils and the boards and whatever who approve these contracts. And what happens is that the cities, because they have such a slim economic base, such small revenue flow, are kind of forced because of budgets to make these kinds of purchases and award these kinds of contracts. And basically what it comes down to is prove it.
Another thing it comes down to is human nature. We take the course of least resistance at the time instead of looking at the cause and effect of the total picture.
Well, again, it's the context. Everything needs to be taken into the context. And the whole context of this polygamy question is, again, so much more than the face of it that you see on TV or you read in the reports. One of the best things that we saw regarding this subject was on a Dateline NBC report where Keith Morrison did a 2-hour special talking to Rebecca Musser. It was a very, very well done piece. A lot of depth, a lot of accuracy. She's a very courageous woman, and she told a very straight up story. And Keith Morrison and Dateline should be applauded for what they did. It was nothing like this Sister Wives business or the National Geographic Polygamy USA. It was a genuine journalistic attempt at telling a story.
That was one of the most honest pieces that I have seen.
It was the best TV presentation I have seen.
Yes. The polygamous cults, from Winston Blackmore in Bountiful, Canada, to James Harmston in southern Utah, to the Colonia Liberón in Mexico, all of them have these huge, expensive homes and very, very wealthy leaders. The economy of the town doesn't seem to merit the castles that are built there. And you go in and see the pictures like of Yearning for Zion Ranch, and we've seen it all on the news. We've seen Warren's, and people think that Warren's the only one that plays this pyramid game of money, because he has not been able to hide it because he got caught and he's now in prison. But isn't it true that every single polygamous cult has a leadership that lives far better than the parishioners?
Oh, absolutely. Power corrupts, and absolute power absolutely corrupts. And the farther up the chain you go, the more accustomed you are to the good wife, the better house, the better food, the more ample wives, younger wives, whatever you want to call it, you know, and again, we go back to selfish and greed and cruelty, and that's what it's about. It's benefiting the people at the top. It has no reach beyond the upper echelons.
The criminal investigation on polygamous crimes with money is huge, and yet when we come across these things, I don't see a program on that itself. It should be out there.
Well, but it won't get the viewership, okay? I mean, you had, like I said, we had the NBC Dateline thing, which was a pure journalistic attempt to discuss the subject. We've seen others in the past. We've seen CNN try to do something. They just didn't have the time or the manpower or the willingness to go into the depth. We've seen Oprah Winfrey, for crying out loud, talking to some polygamous families and walk away going, "Oh, that ain't bad." Well, they didn't scratch the surface.
No, they didn't.
They didn't get into, as we referred to so much here, the context, the depth of it.
They didn't want to get into something that they didn't have enough meat on to prove. I think they were afraid of it, and they just skirted over what would sell. I'm sorry, but ratings are everything now.
Well, yeah, it's ratings are everything, and it's appealing to the mass tastes of the audience and working it in that manner. And if you are not appealing, if you are not funny, clever, cute, whatever, you ain't gonna make it.
When Flora Jessup said to Dr. Phil, "I can show you the graveyard," he changed the subject so fast that was in his, they cut the film, I could see where it had been edited, but he changed the subject so fast it was undeniable.
Dead babies aren't good TV.
Dead babies are not good TV. In my childhood, in my growing up, in my early parenting, we were healed by faith, and those of little faith had to suffer the consequences. Babies born at home, all my babies weren't born at home, but I nearly died having a child without medical care. And I was right in Salt Lake City. The medical care that the women are getting today with government funds is very, very different for the women than the generation before them. But there are still a few that are in an archaic situation and not getting the medical funds because the men don't want them to have it. The position that the women are in, Ed, talk about that.
Well, it's a position of ignorance because they haven't been exposed to the outside world. They don't know what's available there. You know, you need to look at some of the medical costs and the medical benefits that occur as a result of what's going on out there, and there's an ignorance of knowing what's available to them, the kinds of treatments that are out there, and the advances that are made. I mean, you know, if they don't know who the President of the United States is, they're not going to know what the latest medical procedures are and what can happen. I mean, I very seriously wonder if many of those women have ever had a mammogram.
They don't know what that is.
I don't think so.
Never knew what birth control was, but I knew it was a sin. So the women are in bondage to their ignorance and their bloodthirsty God, and they're going to do what they're told.
Yes.
And if their husband allows them medical care through government funding, they'll get it. If he doesn't, they won't. It's his call.
It's his call. And again, you know, we also need to be suspect of the number of visits that are actually made. I mean, you know, I'm a doctor working out in Short Creek, and I know that I'm going to be able to get some funds if I say that so-and-so came into my office. Who's going to prove they didn't?
That's right. That's right. So we have a pyramid game of government funding. We look into Winston Blackmore, $4.5 million arrears in personal taxes. How does a polygamous leader, a guy that's lacking formal education, make that much money? Did he do it exactly the same way Warren did?
I'm sure there's a pattern, there's a model there that they use for how to do it. I mean, you know, we've made references to an organized crime structure. I'm sure there's a model there. I'm sure these guys study each other. You know, I mean, let's face it, it does take some effort to figure out how to get around things and to how to build things so that way you can make it profitable for yourself. I mean, they're businessmen. They know how to work the system. They know how to make the money. Yeah, I'm sure that he's used Warren as a model, or Rulon, or whoever. They learn from each other. I mean, they exchange children for wives. They exchange properties. They do business. You know, yeah, they're going to learn from each other.
Winston had a group of kids working out in the woods, making posts to sell. They had to do that. Living in a trailer house in the cold with little or no heat, sleeping on the floor, working for free, yeah, and eating whatever was brought into them if they could get it. And this was his way of having his own potential lost boys.
Well, it's the matter of control.
Yes, and of course those kids didn't get out and weren't kicked out yet at the point that these investigative reports came out. The lost boys were actually kicked out, discarded, because they weren't needed anymore.
Yeah.
In the concept of a woman standing by and watching her 12-year-old or less child given away in marriage, and her 13-year-old son thrown out on the desert and beaten if he ever comes back, explain the mindset that makes that acceptable to these women that are crying in front of the press because they're taking our families away. These are the same women.
I can't. I'm not of that mindset. I'm not. It's not burned into my brain and soul. I can't relate to that. I can't tell you how, because I'm not there. I don't know how they can deal with it. I don't. It's part of the unexplainable. I can't put myself into that position because I haven't been inundated, I haven't been indoctrinated, and I hadn't been raised that way. I can't put myself in that woman's position because I can't understand it.
I was raised that way, and I couldn't get there, but I didn't know how to escape, and I knew no other reality. We were taught that Jesus Christ was God's only begotten Son. Actually, that's a lie. We were taught that God begot everybody in the spirit world, and we all came down here. But that God had to give his Son up to be crucified. He had to. And that we had to get to the point when we were asked to give a son or a daughter, that we had to do that, or we would not pass the test to be saved in eternity. So when these men come and take your little 12-year-old girl, you thank God that it's a blessing, because in suffering and pain, you're getting brown stamps to save up for rewards in heaven. Women are great sufferers. The martyrdom there, it's masochistic, seriously. It's a sadist, masochistic game, and the women are masochistic. And so they may cry, may be able to not sleep for a week, may lose weight because that happened to their little girl, or because their 13-year-old son was thrown out, but they'll do it so they can stand before God and say, I was willing to sacrifice my child for you.
It's a pitiful situation, and I just hope that we can somehow bring some greater awareness and try to save some other kids from being wrapped up and a part of an untenable, unbelievable world that nobody seems to be able to wrap their arms around from the outside, or is willing to understand.
The responsibility scale is non-existent where I grew up. The real responsibility scale. You had to follow in blind obedience. What happened after that was none of your business. And your responsibility as a woman was to obey. We were literally taught that if we obeyed and the man made a mistake, it wouldn't be our fault, it would be his. We would obey and God would straighten it out in heaven. Yeah. And when I, as a child, questioned things, that's what I was told. It was none of my business, and God would straighten it out in heaven if they were wrong. And my duty was to obey, or it would be held against me for time and all eternity. So questioning in itself was a sin. I want to point this out so that people realize that these people at the bottom are really slaves. They are slaves of their ignorance and their fear. And it's all cloaked in religion, their slavery.
It's horrible.
It is horrible. What do you think can be done about it, Ed, if anything?
The only thing that can happen is greater awareness, education, letting people within those communities somehow understand that there is a different world and a different life out there, and a willingness to accept the reality as opposed to what is portrayed on TV and in the media. It's a greater world out there, and it goes beyond the surface of what you see with Cody Brown and Joe Darger and the rest of it. You have to be willing, though, to go beyond that.
You have to be willing to go beyond what happens when one person has all the power and another has none.
Yeah.
When one person has all the rights and another has none. And doing that in the name of God is not realistic.
No. No.
I am one of 39 children born to my father's 6 wives. I was born in slavery. I was sold into slavery. I was bred as a slave, right here in the land of the free and the home of the brave. When I was a child, there were hundreds of stories just like mine. Today, there are thousands. I've had people contact me and say, "You have no right to paint polygamy with one brush." Oh, really? If you study polygamy and you want the statistics on polygamy worldwide and the damage it does to women and children, please get on a website called Stop Polygamy in Canada and read some of the best in the world, research, psychologists, psychiatrists, from polygamy in all countries. It is a proven fact that when countries accept polygamy, poverty soon follows. No man, no matter how hard he tries, if he tries, can take care of the psychological, emotional, financial, and educational needs of a large family with one wife, let alone as many children as he can possibly spawn by many wives. The more a woman shares her husband, the less of a husband he has. It's a fact that the degree of abuse in all human relationships is in direct proportion to the distance between the empowered and the unempowered. Therefore, polygamy has a great deal more abuse than monogamy because the empowerment of the man and the wife are so far apart. In polygamy, a woman becomes more and more and more and more disempowered. And as she gets older and her husband takes younger and younger and younger women, she becomes more depressed, more unhappy. Statistics show that children born in polygamous families more often than not grow up with the same psychological and emotional problems as children born in the ghetto in fatherless homes. Women that grow up in polygamous families grow up feeling they have no rights because their rights are diminished all along the way. I get a lot of emails from people that say, "This is so unfair. You know nothing. Look at Sister Wives on TV. Look at that wonderful family." Now I'm going to tell you about my wonderful family. Cody Brown and I share a maternal grandfather. His youngest wife, Christine, is my cousin. Cody is a member of the AUB, that is the Apostolic United Brethren. That's the cult that I was born into. Joe Darger wrote a book called Love Times 3. He's in the magazines now with these 3 beautiful women, his wives. People say, you know nothing about Joe Darger. Oh, really? I have a sister, a cousin, and a niece that married Dargers, and Joe's 2 twin wives are my nieces. I knew the Darger family very well. The basic psychological and emotional thread or glue that ties these polygamous groups together is their belief system. In the religious concepts of polygamy, there is more abuse than if there was no religion involved at all. If it's Islamic, if it's Christian polygamy, if it's people that claim and blame Mormonism, they believe and teach that women have no rights. They believe and teach that women should follow and be obedient in order to be accepted. Women are supposed to serve compliant, obedient, breedable slaves. They are there to serve. They also teach that if a woman does not accept polygamy sweetly when her husband takes another wife, something's wrong with her. She has an evil spirit. If a woman is jealous, has her feeling hurt, is caught crying, or is anything but gracious about it, she is wicked. Something's wrong with her. When you watch Sister Wives and you see Cody Brown, Mary, his first wife, says, well, it helps us overcome our negative feelings. No, it doesn't. It helps her push it down and lie to herself and pretend she doesn't have any. There is not one polygamous man I've ever met in my life, and I know thousands of them, literally, not one that would want one of his wives to have another mate. On the contrary, they have a right to condemn her to hell, the loss of her salvation, for time and all eternity, take her children away from her, let her lose her family, or make her lose her family. In these cults, and they are cults, the reason they're cults is because it isn't freedom of choice. The polygamous women, including my relatives on TV, they get up and say, this is our choice. And they've been asked, do you have your free agency to choose? And they say yes. Let me tell you what our free agency means. We have books that are called the Journal of Discourses. These books are in almost every polygamous family that claims or blames Mormonism. Now please note I said claims or blames because they openly admit they don't even belong to the Mormon Church, never did. But by blaming the Mormon Church because there was polygamy in Mormon history, they have found a haven in Utah because Utah doesn't like to prosecute because they have a lot of ancestors that were polygamous and they don't want to deal with the problem. We have gotten so far away from what is right and so many arguments over who is right. What is right is just falling through the cracks. There's nobody protecting human rights.